at right now.
That's good.
What do you think, Vice Chair?
So, at large.
You're not there.
So, according to the memo, the vice chair is vacant.
Oh,
And that's what we're trying to decide, who can be the vice chair. Congratulations, Carl.
that's how I became the chair.
Oh,
I replaced Brandon.
You're volunteer, basically. That's how the meetings with Brian Gentry went. The TMC, if you said something, it was like, thank you for volunteering. Your product.
We can see now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Hear me too?
See? Shut up. the Brian Gentry. She be the chair.
It's familiar.
All right, so we're gonna wait for a quorum. So we're gonna move the action items to later. I'm just looking at the overall agenda. So we'll table 4 and 5.
Just go to the laptop. Do it more conscious.
This computer has to be the visitor. You don't want to be the visitor from here. Which one is the visitor? You mean, I see from here, right?
Right. Or you can add scale for example.
That's still not on full screen. Now I can see.
There you go.
Is that the maximum they go? That is the-
Unless you, yeah, just want to expand yours. You can change the presentation. You don't see it. Okay.
Sure. Okay, now that we've ironed out the technical difficulties, we'll call the meeting to order. for the Hillsborough TPO ITS committee meeting. Okay, so introductions. Margaret Kubelin, Smart Mobility Chief Engineer for the City of Tampa and the Chair of this committee.
Brian McCarthy from the City of Temple Terrace, City Engineer, at large.
I'm Brian Science with Hillsborough County.
Thank you, welcome. With the 3 here, we require 5 for a quorum. So when we get to the agenda, we're gonna move agenda items 4 and 5 after the presentations. So Dale, would you like to call the order or do the roll call?
Sure. Margaret, you have checked in. Brian Zayas also checked in. Brian McCarthy also checked in. I believe we're waiting for Pauline Castillo. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then Anna Quinones and Judith Villegas are excused. Dexter Corbin.
Yep, I'm here online.
Okay. Jeff Sims. Reginald San. I'm sorry.
He's not here yet.
Okay. Achilles Cortales.
I'm here. Hi.
Okay.
Jeff just walked in the door.
Okay, great. I think we still need one more for quorum, so we cannot go for remote participation yet. Once Pauline arrives, let me know and we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, public comment. Do we have any comments to come from the audience? None? Do we have any public comments from anyone online?
Everyone is able to unmute themselves.
Okay, none being heard. Why don't we move down to item number 6, which is status reports. So the first one is going to be the Hillsborough County Transportation Design Manual update. Who's presenting for that?
I am Larry Josephson. I'm online.
Okay, thank you.
Just give me a second, I'm trying to make you the presenter.
Larry, you should see something that's asking if you would like to be a presenter.
It says show my screen.
Okay, great.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
See your desktop.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to swap screens because I got three screens. Hang on a second.
Okay.
I do apologize for the construction noise. We did send somebody down, but they are behind security walls, so we can't get to them to ask them to hold off. So we apologize for that.
This is kind of interesting because I swapped my screens and it swapped the 2 outside screens, and what you're seeing is the middle screen. And I'm not sure that I know how to get it to the middle screen.
If it doesn't work and you want me to I can present and I can advance the slides, but you can try to change the screen or let me know.
Let me see if I can make an adjustment here.
You might need to stop sharing and then reshare and select which screen.
I'll try that, but I'm not sure it's gonna work.
Also might minimize the app and drag it over onto the laptop screen.
I think that may work.
You just saw your but it's a presentation, it's the notes view.
There it is. Yep, you got it.
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
Now it's good.
Need to close a few things here. Okay, does that work?
Yes.
Okay, so this is I'm Larry Josephson. I work for Public Works Technical Services Division, supervise all of the review of CIP project plans and engineering reports. We also update all the manuals for Public Works every 2 years. We're in that process right now. It's the odd 2 years. And we also do some in-house design. But today I'm going to talk about, this is probably the first new county manual produced in many, many years. And it's called the Hillsborough County Transportation Design Manual. It will be known as HCTDM for short. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the company of Burgess and Nyepel, who's helped us out for the last 2.5 years working on this project. And the key people in that were Angelo Belluccia, Cardi Rodriguez, and Lindo Wu. They're very instrumental in helping produce a lot of this. I also had a great in-house team. We met almost every Friday for the last couple of years. Every time an issue was brought up, these people sat in the meeting, we all discussed it, made decisions on what went into the manual. Leland Dykus, who's our director for technical services, Mike Williams, the county engineer, Bob Campbell, who's had the transportation section, Abigail Flores, myself, Glenn Morris, and of course, Virgil and Nyepel. On the agenda today, going to talk a little bit about the statistics that kind of led us to the need for producing such a design manual, the overall implementation plan, certain details of the HCTDM manual. Can't cover everything. It's currently about 80 pages long. And then what the project schedule is for the publication of the manual. So some interesting statistics. There are 692 people per day moving to Florida. That's the highest state net migration trend in the country. So we have a lot of people moving in. So there's a lot of people on our roadways, and unfortunately, that produces a lot of crashes. For Hillsborough County, we're the 4th highest location where people move to. Basically, 17,000 people a year, or 47 people per day, move to Hillsborough County. So that results in a lot of annual actual fatalities. Through 2022, there were 253 deaths reported on our roadways. That's 5 deaths per week. very unfortunate that we had this many accidents on our roadways. So 44% of those crashes are contained in lane departures, pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities, and fatalities at intersections, typically right angle crashes. Lane departures are usually single vehicles leaving the road for a lot of reasons. The driver loses control, oversteers when they go off the edge of the road, maybe impaired by drugs or drinking. So our focus is to kind of provide designs that will address those type of issues. So just another statistics, we're the 4th highest metro area with deaths per 100,000 people. You can see the rate here is 3.55. However, if you don't look at the rate of people or how many people that we have, we have the highest death rate of any of these top 10 at 559 deaths between the years of 2016 and 2020. It's a pretty bad statistic for our area. So in 2021, 92% of the fatalities occurred on roads with posted speeds greater than 40 miles an hour. 71% involved speeding or aggressive driving. 2 out of 3 people involved were 35 or younger. Why is this happening on our roads? Roads were designed mainly because the roads were designed for moving vehicles as fast as possible, and didn't consider the communities, land uses, or people that were using the road. Up until about 8 years ago, the total focus on designing highways was pushing as many cars down the corridor as fast as you can. I took a class about over the 35 years that I have been doing roadway design with DOT. I took this class about 3 times. The last time I took it, the same individual had given all those classes, and he stated, you know, for 30 years I've been teaching this access management class, and boy, I thought I had it down pat. And he said, yesterday I found out I was totally wrong. This was about 7 or 8 years ago. And he said, we've been designing roads to move the cars, and we forgot all about people and other modes of transportation. So how can we think and plan and design differently? So we've taken the first steps in our county by adopting Vision Zero and looking at updated policies, standards, and procedures to foster a culture of safety and planning, and thinking of the other uses of the roadway besides just transporting cars, the uses for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other multimodal means of transportation. So what's the next steps in our policy guidelines? We're going to transition towards safe and complete streets. We look at safety, invest in a safer environment for all users and more reliable roadways. Context design is just a new concept that also came out in the last 7 or 8 years. We're moving forward with that and looking at to satisfy the purpose and need of each community. Our multimodal, looking at multimodal access and comfortable facilities for all users to link people to all destinations. And also interdepartment coordination between all the departments within the county to help provide these facilities with safety, context sensitivity to the community, and addressing all multimodal means of travel. So we've already started down the road. The comprehensive plan has been updated and adopted. Context classification map was a new, it says new, but actually this is the first context classification map was adopted. Our planning group in the county is working on a complete street guidebook. It's in draft format. And we're producing this design manual, which we intend to publish by October. Subcomponents of all this are context-based access management standards. Target and design speed tools are also going to be incorporated into this new manual. So we have 3 resources working together. The first started with the context-based classification map. The planning group came up with the Complete Streets Guidebook, which gives ideas of possible typical sections that can be applied. And then our design manual, as we'll show later in the presentation, identifies the criteria to provide these new typical sections and ways of organizing lanes and bicycle traffic and parking on streets. So the mobility elements to achieve the context design, we look at, of course, we have the governing Vision Zero policy. We would like to incorporate context-based design, planning, and design principles. The picture on the right here, we would like the roads to look like this, where we have bike lanes with concrete separators. Instead of just a grass strip, change the way we drain the roads by producing bioswales, providing shade trees, wider sidewalks for pedestrians, lowering the speed limit, making target speeds that are reduced to help prevent traffic accidents. As you can see, other items providing lighting and so forth for safety of pedestrians. So we're also looked at incorporating transit with land use, advanced traffic management systems to control the traffic. There's new emerging technology that provides resilience and many different choices to help provide these type of roadways. So how do we classify the road? Originally, the old way, all we did was identify the functional classification. It was an arterial, a collector, or local. And many of the design criteria were based on those roadway classifications. But now with the ideal of context classification, we look at the surrounding environment, the nature of the road, whether it's rural, a town, a suburban area, or urban area. So, and as you look at the different types of roads, arterials, collectors, and local roads, the treatment of the or the use of that road changes from mobility to access. So local roads, as you know, provide all the access for housing and so forth. And as we move to roads that move a lot of traffic, you're looking at mobility. So this is Hillsborough County's context classification. We have 5 context classifications that include, we combine what they call natural and rural, which is C1 and C2. We have residential, C3, and we also have C3 commercial. We have C3 town and C4. That's different than the FDOT classifications, where they have actually 8 classifications. We don't have a lot of natural areas that are just forest and large farm areas. So we have rural areas and very little of C1. So we combine those two those context classifications. We don't really have C2T, so we created C3T, which is a suburban town instead of rural town. Rural towns are really surrounded by a forest or large agricultural areas. We have the C3R and C3C, and we have C4. We don't have C5 and C6. This is like downtown Tampa and areas surrounding downtown Tampa, so we didn't need those context classifications. So we made up all of our context classifications, and here's how we go from the FDOT system to our system. So you can see C1 and C2 are combined. C2T becomes suburban town, rural town becomes suburban town. The suburban residential and suburban commercial are the same, and the urban general are basically, there's basically no change. And so here's our map. This first map was produced in February 2022. It's a static map, but there's a link which is not working, but there's a link to the GIS classification. Try that one more time, but no, not working. So that's a GIS map, and you can zoom in, see all the streets and everything close up for all the context classifications. So the Complete Streets Guidebook looked at all the arterials, locals, and collectors, and they divided it into our context classifications. And then they had sub-classifications for different like for suburban residential, they had neighborhood roads and collector roads. And these are the concepts that they went by: typical cross-section, priority of right-of-way, how much green infrastructure, vision zero, speed management, and placemaking. So that was their guide to developing the Complete Streets Guidebook, but that's not a design criteria. So, and just to give you an idea of some of the typicals that they developed, some of the numbers that they have up here may not actually reflect the design criteria, because like lane width can change depending on the speed on the roadway. But they produce these typicals, and this one is for a Main Street, a C4. They've provided bike lanes, parking, buffer zones, and the travel ways and large sidewalks. Some areas for street furniture and so forth. And I'll show you one other section that they developed. Regional commercial C3C section. And this is what we're looking at for developing future typical sections. One thing that you notice here that there's shared use paths, but there's no bike lanes on the street. And so we're trying to, as we're going into future designs, we're going to be trying to eliminate some of the bike lanes on the street, even though that may not be in what some bike riders would want, but moving the shared use paths, creating the shared use paths off of the actual typical sections provide safer means. And that's one of the things that we're looking at overall, is providing much safer typical sections for the users of different types of communities. So what is actually in the county's design manual? So basically, we're gonna look at the design manual outline, the design criteria and guidance using a context-based approach. We have enhanced details for specific uses for the county's 5 context classifications. We're looking at speed, safety and speed management strategies, applying it to all modes of transportation considered. And the manual identifies county preferred standards. About 6 years ago, we adopted FDOT criteria. The FDOT criteria applies to a little higher level of roads, faster speeds, and higher volumes. So sometimes we have to modify those adopted standards, and we do that by creating design bulletins and stating how we would like a certain standard to be. So this is basically the outline. There's several things going on in this manual. We're telling people how the design standards and specifications that we like, the CIP resources that we have. We talk about how to develop the plans that how we want our plans to look like. And there's a few of these areas that are highlighted in blue. These are new analysis that we have provided in the design manual. Multimodal safety analysis is a very specific way looking at design crashes. Talk more about that. Speed management, and then I'm going to talk about the county arterials, county typical sections for arterial and collector roads. So the design manual highlights all modes of transportation, connecting people and community, heightened awareness for safety, opportunity to reduce speeds, shared use paths for suburban and rural areas as opposed to on-street bike lanes, emergency vehicle accommodations. We met with the fire chief and emergency services people. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know, the fire chief has the ability to overrule the kind of typical sections that we create in order to make sure that their vehicles can get through a roadway without knocking off people's mirrors or having their mirrors damaged, which was when we met with them, was a big complaint. And so we've widened the lanes on some roads so they can have a clear path to travel down the roadway. There's also alternative bicycle protection treatments that we've developed, and right of way for corridor preservation is determined by the new typicals that we have developed. So one of the tools that we've developed is the multimodal safety analysis. It's a look at specific crashes, severe crashes. So they have to collect all the crash data and review it. A multimodal safety analysis looks at the crash before, during, and after. And this helps select countermeasures and based on a benefit cost analysis. Finally, they have to, this process, when engineers use this process that's in the new design manual, the HCGM, they have to make recommendations of their innovations and solutions. We also developed a speed management tool. This tool, as you can see, the graphic in the lower left, the higher speed, the least likely you're going to survive being hit by a vehicle if you're a pedestrian. So on the right side, we have various treatments to control speed. Some of these you drive through all the time, roundabouts. There's speed feedback signs, pedestrian crossing treatments. You've seen them being placed all over the county. They're called RRFBs, so the flashing signals that don't make you stop, but when it's flashing and there's a pedestrian in the walkway, that you have to let the pedestrian go. There's different ways of gateway treatments, chicanes, which are variations in the alignment. So you have to slow down to make those jogs in the alignment. So we're looking at all of these type of speed management tools, and the list has grown and will be produced in the new HCTDM. So the design manual, one of the things that we have a top 20 in the next 30 highest crash corridors. So if you're a consultant working on a one of these corridors and or you're working on a project and it happens to be one of these corridors, each transportation project must identify if the road is included in the top 20 or high 30 injury corridors, and once identified, effective design countermeasures measures and strategies must be provided for reducing fatalities and severe crashes and improving safety for all users. So here's a typical that was developed for C1, C2 that was in the planning manual. And this is the typical section that we developed for this. As I said, the lane widths here change with the speed. So the lower, lower speed roads have narrow lane widths as opposed to like 50, 55 miles have 12-foot lane widths. So this is a rural section. As you can see, on this particular section, there's no sidewalks. We're going to use shared use path, at least on one side. And then there's an option to put a shared use path or a sidewalk on the opposite side. Again, what we're trying to do is work in concert with our planning people who developed some of these typical sections, and we're trying to match that in the actual typical sections that we're going to be used to identify the right-of-way widths for the future identification of right-of-way. So we have a C3 suburban section. This happens to be a 2-lane section. Again,
Excuse me. Hi, this is Margaret.
Yeah.
This is going a little longer than what we had planned, and we have other business that's necessary that we need to cover. Can you?
Okay, I can wrap it up in a couple minutes, 2 minutes.
Yeah, sorry to cut it short.
No, it's okay. We have a third section. I'm not going to go through it, but just to say that we're trying to match what the planning group came up with the typical sections, and so I'll move on. So over the last, since 2020, we've produced like 50 or 60 design bulletins. You can access these off of the website by going to the Public Works Publications website. There's a button for technical bulletins. These are changes that we have made or processes that we want followed. So the schedule for the manual is we're in this period, this every 2-year period for on odd years, which is the Transportation Technical Manual schedule in green on the top. The schedule for the manual is on the bottom. We're going to, in May, we rolled the manual publication into this schedule, and we're going to, some of these dates have been moved a little further on. We've already had our initial comments made, and we're actually answering those comments. We're going to publish the manuals with the revised corrections that we accepted towards the end of July, and then during August we'll have open workshops. When we publish those manuals, there will be an opportunity to make comments on them. If you sign up for our website and we have your email, you'll get a copy of the manual and you can make comments. So what will all this do? It'll save lives. Roads will benefit all users. Roads will benefit our communities. And this goes beyond transportation to have better economy and a healthier environment. We think the plan and design, we will think, plan and design differently to make our roads safer for all users of our communities. So I'm done. Any questions, or if you need to move on, that's fine.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
I believe Ronald Chin from FDOT had his hand up. Let me see if I can actually make him a panelist to unmute if he has a question.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, he can unmute now.
I can't see the controls, so Ron, are you speaking?
He's not at the moment and is self-muted.
Sorry, my bad. Thank you for asking.
Go ahead.
I think he was saying his name was up by accident.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I misunderstood.
You gotta be a chair.
Oh. Well, thank you, everyone that contributed towards this document. Obviously, I've been in the world of safety, Vision Zero, complete streets, context-sensitive design for decades. And to have a document like this as guidance is really powerful, especially knowing how our design and operations of our roadways strongly influence the quality of life as well as the safety and well-being of everyone. So every step that we take, I know there's a lot of documents, but it's worthwhile trying to bring it all together and make it comprehensive, no matter where you sit, whether you're the consultant, the designer, the signal tech, anybody, first responders, you know, it all blends together in order to protect and help enhance the safety of everyone. So keep up the good work. It obviously shows there's a lot there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the chance to present here.
I'm sure we'll have you back. Oh, and let's make sure everyone has a link that we'd be able to go in and offer any kind of comments. So, good. Okay, Cheryl, going back, Gail, excuse me. So Pauline has arrived during the presentation, and so we now have a quorum.
Excellent. If you'd like to call for a vote of consent for remote participation, Chair.
Yes.
We need a motion in a second.
Oh, I need a motion to state that there's a quorum? No.
I'll make a motion for consent for remote participation. So the
Oh, for
people
the
online.
remote. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'll second the motion.
And then Brian's going to second that. All in favor, say aye.
Which Brian was the second, please?
Brian Zayas.
Thank you.
God, he's Brian. We just swapped one for the other. Okay, anyone not in favor? Anyone opposed, please indicate. None being heard, the motion passes. So we'll move to item number 4 of the agenda, which is review and approval of the minutes. The minutes were sent out. Were they? Or are you gonna? Okay, yeah, the minutes were sent out, posted after April 6th. And it's also included in the packet. Any comments in regard to the minutes?
I don't really have much of a comment, but there was a reference to CAC not approving due to a lack of design documents. I mean, was that part of our conversation or was that relevant? Or, you know, or was that an oversight? It was on the tip amendment.
Oh, yeah, they had a comment, but it was not an amendment, but they had a comment.
And that was just something we talked about because we were curious what CAC was doing. Okay, I just don't recall it and I didn't know if it was an oversight.
You were not there.
April I was, I believe.
Did we have a motion approval?
Just checking. Okay. Wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else in that regard. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll present the motion to approve the minutes. Brian Zayas.
Do we have a second?
Second, Brian McCarthy.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? None being heard, the motion passes. Okay, next we move to agenda item number 5, under the action items. First, we have the Hillsborough Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. Connor McDonald?
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry for getting up a little bit early. share the screen here.
Make it. You would do.
Is the screen connected to it?
I'm assuming that it's pretty much, you should be able to.
Yes.
Or is it my screen? We don't have controls here.
All right, I think we should be good to go. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, Connor McDonald, TPO staff. I'm here to present the electric vehicle infrastructure plan. And if you caught on the NPR radio this morning, there was an article about the electric vehicle infrastructure and chargers. So timely, I was very excited to hear that this morning. So this plan was developed in partnership with Peterson and Associates. We started scoping around last summer, last fall, and it's culminated into a needs assessment, a current conditions analysis. We also did some public engagement. So I'll start with why now? So there's a growing demand for electric vehicles, which means a growing demand for chargers. The growth is growing every day. There's a private need. So you see like Tesla chargers at Wawa's, and you may wonder why you need for a plan, right? So there's a need for code guidance, making sure we're placing the right chargers in the right locations, making sure we incentivize the appropriate locations and the appropriate neighborhoods. And there's also a public need. So a need for in our public parks, libraries, etc. And going off of that, there's an Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. Of course, you're familiar with that. And it will provide $2.5 billion to cities, counties, local governments, and tribes to implement electric vehicle chargers. So we want to take advantage of that as well. So the benefits of acting now versus reacting later. For example, the initial cost of a public charger, the installation is around $920. This is according to the city of San Francisco. And a retrofit cost, so implementing the charger at a later point, is $3,500. So we are saving money if we plan for now versus reacting later. There's also a diverse vehicle market. If we plan now, there will be a diverse vehicle market versus a limited purchasing of EVs in the future. So there's also, we also want to ensure equal access to charging for all communities versus charging deserts if we do not plan. So the purpose of the plan is to put charging stations where people need them, plan for need and impact first. We want to prioritize the most impactful and the most needed chargers in the correct location. Another purpose of the plan is to ensure policies and codes will allow for easy and smooth installation of chargers. So I'll go over a few sections: the industry background research, existing conditions analysis, public outreach, and stakeholder engagement, and finally recommendations in the final report. So there are about 4 types of electric vehicles. We first saw the Toyota Prius. It was released in 2000, and by 2011 it had reached 1 million sales. And this was our first introduction to electric vehicles, the hybrid electric vehicle. By 2011, Chevy had produced the Chevrolet Volt, a plug-in hybrid, and this was the hot topic until Tesla's in the mid-2010s, excuse me. And these are fully all-electric, battery electric vehicles. And finally, there's a 4th type, fuel cell electric vehicles, which is more common for buses and long haul trucking. So some benefits and barriers to EV adoption. Some benefits is that there's reduced fuel costs, reduced emissions, and reduced maintenance costs. Some barriers are that initial purchase price of an electric vehicle tends to be higher. Sometimes there's misinformation or lack of trust regarding electric vehicles. And there's also charging access, which the article this morning mentioned was the #1, in their survey was the #1 response to limitations of purchasing an electric vehicle, that fear of not having enough access. So how are they currently being used? 0.5% of the 2 to 3 million transportation network company drivers in the US currently drive EVs, so that's Uber or Lyft, or similar companies around that. 1% of the 21,000 public transport buses are electric, and EVs are driven an average of 7,000 miles per year, compared to 10.2 thousand for gasoline and diesel powered vehicles. So there's 3 levels of charging. Level 1 is similar to a toaster. That's more common for home place. It's the most common for what you imagine in your house. It does take 5 to 6 hours to charge for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. A level 2 charger would be similar to a dryer. Is found in all sorts of locations, the home, workplace, or in publicly accessible locations. And level 3, also referred to as DCFC. That's going to be what you imagine as those Tesla chargers, and that's common in workplaces and in public. And that would be similar to an air conditioner. So some EV adoption trends from 2018 to 2021, the number of electric vehicles in Hillsborough County nearly doubled, or did double, more than doubled. Some quick facts, Tampa Bay area is one of 9 major US metro areas where used EVs are selling faster than used conventional vehicles. In Florida, in 2035, between 5 and 20% of light-duty vehicles are projected to be EVs. And nationwide, by 2030, 32% of annual light-duty vehicles sales are projected to be electric. And I just wanted to highlight some articles regarding the EV boom. I mean, everywhere we open our computers, it seems like every day there's a new article about electric vehicles and charging. Even locally, the sheriff's office added electric vehicles to its fleet. So kind of to show you where the infrastructure is now, there's about 500 chargers in Hillsborough County. Most of them are level 2, and the density is, kind of near those workplaces in downtown and the university area, also near those hospitals, the Veterans Hospital there in the north. And in terms of access, about 11% of condo units have fast charging infrastructure within 1 mile radius. About 39% of jobs in Hillsborough are within a half mile of a level 2 charger. And about 7% of activity center areas are within a half mile of a level 3 charging. So we also did some public outreach and stakeholder engagement that I'll touch on. We did the survey through SurveyMonkey, and we kind of focused on both electric vehicle drivers and non-electric vehicle drivers to get kind of both sides of the coin. We asked the question, we have several questions, but one of them being, when do you most often use a publicly accessible charger? 63% of those respondents said for long weekends and holiday trips. For those who don't currently drive an EV, 58% mentioned that a fast public charging station every 50 miles on major US highways would increase their interest in purchasing or leasing an electric vehicle. Some other findings from the public outreach is that about 80% prefer to charge at home, and you'll see that pop up later in an assumption. Respondents prioritize amenities, including bathrooms and convenience store options, and about 30% are concerned about the dependability of EVs during emergency situations like hurricanes. We also had some stakeholder listening sessions, so if you were part of that, we greatly appreciate that. Some community leaders and disadvantaged communities mentioned that they were fearful that a lack of investment in communities previously underserved could result in charging deserts in their neighborhoods. FDOT recommended that we consider a medium-duty fleet in the plan. Hart mentioned that they're hesitant to transition to battery electric buses due to vehicle range and reliability. So I wanted to get into the needs projections to show you kind of what we're predicting would be needed for electric vehicles for all of those uses. So this slide will show the adoption rate in Hillsborough County is higher than Florida, but lower than Orange County in Orlando. Florida and the city of Orlando have defined projected EV adoption rates. So we've used that as a medium and kind of use that as a guide to show where we'd be by 2050. So based on that need, in 2023, there were 6,000 or about 0.5% of the fleet that were electric. By 2050, we're predicting in a low scenario, a low adoption scenario, about 17% of the fleet, and in a high adoption scenario, about 69% of the fleet will be electric. So using those numbers, we use the Department of Energy's EVI Pro Light tool. And again, I mentioned that 80% would be an assumption. So meaning that 80% of the EV charging to occur at home, that's one of the assumptions of this tool. Another is that 75% of households have access to home charging. So using that model, we're able to predict that we'll need between 4,000 and 16,000 chargers to meet that demand publicly or publicly accessible by 2050. And we've taken some of our other use case scenarios like the TNCs for Uber and Lyft, Hart and Transit, and commercial delivery as FDOT recommended. We're predicting that an additional about 500 chargers will be needed to accommodate for Uber and Lyft. Between 4 and 160 will be needed to accommodate for Hart buses. And that really, that's a huge variation. So it depends on their adoption rates. And it also might need additional buses to accommodate for the range of some of their routes. For commercial delivery, an additional 1 to 3% of chargers will be needed to accommodate for commercial delivery. And we're thinking not necessarily like FedEx or Amazon, who would likely charge at a depot, more of like mom and pop delivery vehicles. And that's based on the amount of VMT driven by commercial delivery vehicles in Hillsborough County. So we have some policy recommendations as well. A prioritization framework is one of our goals of this plan. So a charging location that would close a public charging desert, install chargers where there is a high demand, ensure that chargers are equitably distributed, so it would be close a gap in a disadvantaged community, and also install the right charger in the right location. For example, a level 2 charger that would take a few hours in a workplace. So I'll kind of go off my notes here because I want to start clear. Using multiple case studies from Florida and the US, we developed recommendations for charging locations for new developments. EV capable would mean that parking spaces require just the infrastructure necessary for future installation of EV charging. EV ready would mean that it's capable plus a wired outlet, and EV installed, of course, would mean that all necessary infrastructure is installed. Some existing code examples include Orlando, which required 20% of parking spaces in new multifamily hotel developments. Miami requires 20% of spaces in all new developments. And Coral Gables requires 5% of EV installed in all new development with 10 or more spaces. Considering the demand and need, we're recommending policies that should require 25 to 50% of on-site parking spaces should be EV capable or EV ready, and that 5 to 15% should be EV installed for new multifamily and commercial developments. Incentives are useful in promoting the creation and expansion of EV infrastructure in existing developments, as well as promoting the installation of chargers beyond what is required for new developments. So I'm using examples across the nation. We're recommending potential density bonuses in return for incorporating EV chargers, a reduction in the required minimum parking in return for offering EV charging, and/or expedited permitting and approvals or reduce or waive fees in new developments with EV infrastructure. And of course, with the consideration that these are carefully used and with other benefits as well. We don't, of course, that would be up to land use planners, but we don't want to combine these incentives with incentives for affordable housing that might waiver those codes and those permitting processes. So we also have some design considerations, of course, ADA accessible mobility features, so physical access and accessible communication features, designing in conflicting or sensitive areas. So we want to avoid charging spots near curbside bus lanes or bike parking features. Security and cybersecurity require EVSC to utilize standards for direct secure payments, and there are more design considerations included in the final report. So what's next? We want to monitor technology developments and planning for EV infrastructure to make sure we're on the cutting edge. We want to continue to fund and enhance non-auto modes to develop livable communities. So we know that EVs and EV infrastructure is not the end all be all for transportation issues. It's just a part of that puzzle. We want to ensure equitable access to EV adoption and infrastructure, and ensure reliable and resilient charging infrastructure in relation to hurricane evacuations. So there's a link here in the presentation to the plan and the posted web page, and we'll release that plan in the next days. The recommended action today is to approve the electric vehicle infrastructure plan and recommend approval to the TPO board. And with that, I'll take any comments or questions.
All right, thank you very much, Connor. I really appreciate it. Okay, so from the floor, are there any questions, comments? Jeff?
Okay, I don't, yeah, probably more comment related. So here representing the Environmental Protection Commission, we are super supportive of, alternative use. We had one of the first Priuses in Florida. We're still driving a 13-year-old electric vehicle that we have. They're about to turn over. We also learned some stuff the hard way. And we helped the county acquire 8 stations through a grant. So we jumped on the grant to get those free charging stations, right? Put it mostly up at libraries. And again, the county did it, we just helped. And everything was good. What we never budgeted for was replacement. Those units, the software ran out. Some of them started breaking down. Some of them, the software was no longer licensed and they just would not function anymore. And there was no money in the budget for it. So what's happened since is they replaced them along with a tiered charging structure with the intent of consistent usage assumed, which would then bankroll the future purchases when they break down again. The only problem with that is that the charging structure has made it so that nobody uses them. We have 2 at our office and I hardly ever see anybody using them because it just doesn't, it's not cost effective. And then of course there were some fluctuations in gas prices that also affected that too. So I don't have an answer for you. Like I said, it wasn't a question as much as it was a comment, but certainly you need to look ahead. You need to also consider the monthly cost. If it's going to be a station that's monitored, like the charge point ones that we have, we had to pay a monthly fee, the county does. What we decided to do is instead of, besides those 2 public stations, we put in some 2 inexpensive Clipper Creek, bought them off the internet, level 2 that have run great for about 8 years. They're not serviced. We don't have a software package. They're plug and play. And those are only for they're behind the gate, a locked gate. They're only for our staff, county pool vehicles. But, I don't know what you gleaned from all that, but just some stuff that, to consider. One thing that has evolved is the length. When we bought our first one, its max range was 80 miles. So, I mean, we always had to be considerate about where we were driving. Now you're seeing 180 to 200. That's lessened that burden. One other issue we had is, I think you're kind of addressing it, but you'll see it, is the, nowadays the modern charging, you can get it done with, even on a level 2, 15 to 20 minutes. You locate it at a place, where there's some kind of entertainment. Like you said, it's a good thing. But what we were running into too is people that worked near our complex would park it in the spot and leave it there for the day. And there was nothing to move them out. And there was no real policy we could do. Now, fortunately, we had people that were considerate. We talked to them and they said, hey, when mine's full, you can take it off mine and plug it into yours. So we were able to kind of max it out. But that was only because they were courteous. And then so what it evolved into was developing charges and disincentives to say, if you leave it there too long, you're going to have to start paying more money, which then that kind of puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So I guess I'm just putting these under the challenges category of something to consider. You know, the answer is not necessarily having 50 spaces because that does, 45 are normally not used. That doesn't seem cost effective either, but just, it's evolved. We're certainly excited. I think the biggest thing we hear is people want them along corridors because they're more concerned about traveling distances. And that's, I think, the biggest key to look at some of these areas. Like what's the one project where they're building like a truck stop on 41? Not a truck stop, it's like a place to park the trucks.
Yes.
Maybe you put some EV stations, off to the side there because you're already running all that infrastructure. There would probably be a place for it. It's right on the corridor. Because apparently putting them at rest areas, there's some big federal resistance to that there or policies in place. But
Right.
So maybe there's some alternatives. So again, I'm not going to ramble any further than I already have, but I'm excited to see that you guys are looking at it and certainly supportive about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jeff, that's really good information to have. That's awesome. Did you have a comment?
No.
Oh, okay. Anyone online? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a comment. Jeff, that brings up the topic because I've noticed that even at the county parking, there are few electric vehicle spots. I don't think they do monitor that you have to leave it charged. So I'm assuming that once it charges, you don't have to, it only charges till it's full, right? So then there won't be any cost to keep it plugged in.
Those are part of the ones that we rolled out 8-10 years ago. And I don't know this, for certain, but no, I believe if you leave it charged, you'll start getting charged a higher rate after 4 hours.
From on here.
From the ones across the street.
Okay, those ones are really cheap. I heard that it's only 50 cents an hour, so.
If it is, that's changed because,
Okay.
there were the ones in the first floor and the
Yeah,
ones right
there
across the
are
street.
4
Yeah.
or 5 spots. So I found it really cheap compared to the price you have to pay for a private Tesla or another charger.
Fair enough. I just know what the feedback we get, and then I know I never see ours being used. So.
Any other comments from online? No? Okay. May we have a motion to approve the recommendations? Could you put that up?
Sorry, I have to switch back.
I'd like to be sure we're accurate.
Can you please switch back to the screen?
Okay, the motion was,
It's approve the electric vehicle infrastructure plan and recommend approval to the team.
I'll make the motion to approve the electric vehicle infrastructure plan and forward to the board.
that was Jeff. Do we have a second?
This is Dexter. I second it too.
Dexter seconds the motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None being heard, the motion passes. Thank you. Our next presentation is coming, it's a memorandum of understanding on creating the Tampa Bay MPO from Elizabeth Watkins.
It's just minor. I know you guys are running short of time.
No, that's fine. But,
I was able to access.
you are, but I'm going to share from here.
Can I just share from, I prefer from here.
Yeah, of course.
Elections.
Thank you for your patience. Elizabeth Watkins, TPO staff. I'm here to present today and seek your recommendation to the TPO board to approve the MOU on creating a Tampa Bay MPO. So for those of you who have been a part of the MPO world for a while, this might sound familiar to you about merging the MPOs. It's been a perennial conversation over the past 30 years. And what it's all about is in this map, you can see this yellow area. And what that is, that's the Tampa St. Pete Transportation Management Area. That is the geography in which MPOs are designated by federal law. And back in the 70s, there were 2 separate urbanized areas, just in Tampa, just around St. Pete. But a lot has changed. We're growing tremendously. And now that geography falls amongst 3 counties. It has for the past 10 to 15 years. One other additional piece of context before I jump into the MOU. In this recent legislative session, the Florida legislature passed a law requiring that the 3 MPOs of Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough submit a feasibility report on the benefits, costs, and processes of consolidating into a single MPO. So the legislature wasn't saying you have to do this, but you need to study it and submit a report to us by the end of the year. And I just mentioned that because that, I think, is important of where the legislature is going. And the idea behind this MOU is that it's a locally driven approach to consolidating the MPOs into one regional MPO. So what are the benefits to doing something like this? Well, one piece of feedback that I feel like I've heard over and over and over in the Tampa Bay region is we don't speak with one voice. So having a regional MPO could have that one voice. It could help build trust and collaboration and really define that transportation agenda for the region. It helps when competing for discretionary funds in DC. Regions who work together effectively and say, okay, well, we'll do your project this year and then next year we'll submit the project at the county over. That has been to be an effective strategy in leveraging and winning those federal discretionary grants. And also merging the 3 MPOs would make us the largest one in Florida, bigger than Miami-Dade, bigger than Broward. So we would have more weight from a statewide and national perspective because you would have multiple representatives from the state and national level advocating the interests of one MPO rather than 3. But this is a very complex proposal and there are some cons to a merger. So often you'll hear regional issues might dilute those local ones. So smaller communities or neighborhoods may not have as much influence in the transportation planning process or help prioritizing those projects. Creating a regional MPO also does not guarantee any more funds. There are set formulas based on the geography I mentioned earlier. It could help us compete for discretionary funds, but again, those are discretionary and it's not a guarantee that we would bring in more money if we were one regional MPO in the Tampa Bay area. Also, there has been some concern that going to a regional model would weaken transportation and land use coordination. Right now, Hillsborough and Pinellas MPOs sit within their land use planning agency, and there's a lot of benefits to that, reviewing comp plans, rezonings, and having that synergy and that thoughtfulness when thinking about transportation and land use. So I'll just give a big picture summary of what's in the MOU. So the MOU, again, is the locally driven way to work towards a regional MPO. And it just sets a framework in which the 3 MPO boards could work towards being a regional body by July 1st of 2027. So the first of those general principles is apportionment, voting structure. And it says, you know, representation on the board should be proportional to population. So right now, Hillsborough County has about 55% of the population, followed by Pinellas, which is about 45, and then Pasco has the remainder. So that should be reflected in the voting structure. It also briefly mentions that voting membership should be for elected officials and potentially for transportation operators. We're a little unique in the Hillsborough TPO, where about 5 or 6 of the voting members are from FIA or the Airport Authority or other ones and not elected officials. Additionally, the MOU talks about balancing the need between local and regional projects and needs. And in terms of funding, that there needs to be a long-term commitment to float grants to maintain the MPO program. It's reimbursable, so there needs to be a host agency that can help float those upfront costs. The last few provisions within the MOU are emphasizing outreach with all local jurisdictions. So in Hillsborough, there are 3 municipalities. In Pinellas, there are 27. And while maybe every single municipality might not have a vote on this ultimate board, their input is important in forming this regional MPO. So that's just to emphasize the importance of outreach and coordination with local jurisdictions and the public. It also talks about the importance of maintaining federally required plans and programs. We must do that to ensure that the pipeline of federal funds continues without issue, so that needs to be thoughtfully done. It also gives some direction on staff services agreements for hosting the MPO as well as a current host agency. And it also recognizes that existing staff with the 3 MPOs should you'd be provided an opportunity to be employed by that regional MPO or have an opportunity to stay with the current host agency. So this is a multi-year process, but to just elaborate a little bit more about what we're focusing on this year is defining that apportionment plan, defining that voting structure for a regional MPO, putting together a proposed budget of what this agency would look like, what the cash flow would need to look like, as well as focusing on outreach to local governments and the public. So again, emphasizing that outreach is important. Just yesterday, we released a public input survey. So if you would humor me and if you would consider either using your phone to take the survey, it's only 5 minutes. We would love your input. It'll also be posted through the TPO's communication channels. But this will be up for about 6 weeks and will be broadcasted through various media mechanisms. But we're really looking to hear from the public in a public-friendly way. How would this decision to go regional impact you, and what should we be considering as the board fixes for this? So the other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is if the boards decide to go towards a regional MPO, what would that look like for the committees? So this is just a summary of all of the committees across the 3 MPOs. And you can see for ITS, there's of course one in Hillsborough, your fabulous group, and Pasco also has one as well. So I'd love some feedback from you today on if we went to a regional MPO, what makes sense for an ITS committee? Does it make sense to continue to have its own county-based ITS committee? Does it make sense to go to a regional model and meet in the central location, but just have a regional committee, ITS committee? Does it make sense to have a hybrid of those? Just kind of some initial thoughts on how you think that would be best served. Given the unique mission of your committee, I would be really interested in your thoughts that way. So this is my last slide, just wrapping up of where we are and where we're going. So continuing the outreach conversation and the other deliverables I mentioned earlier in the fall, each MPO board will be considering this MOU. Again, it's just a framework of principle on towards moving towards a regional MPO. And then the regional Transportation Management Area Leadership Group, which essentially is just made up of representatives from Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas, will review the apportionment plan and the business model. And then in December, that will get approved by the TMA Leadership Group, as well as submittal to the legislature of that study that I mentioned earlier that is required by December 31st. So the recommendation we're seeking today is your thoughts on recommending the TPO board to sign this MOU in September. And then I'd love to also hear your thoughts about what a regional ITS committee could or should look like.
That's a good question. Okay. Okay, first of all, before we move into the recommendation, do we have additional or any comments or questions? Like,
I do have a question. if you could just go a little bit more into the apportionment. So it says the proportional representation based on population. What do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, so really that's a fancy way of just saying how many, you can only have 25 votes on an MPO board. How does that get divvied up amongst the 3 counties and municipalities?
Okay.
And what that clause is saying is that it should be consistent with population, just to have, fair and equal representation.
Okay. But so is it going to be, because sometimes it can be so skewed, does that mean there's a minimum, like a minimum of 1 vote? Like, you have 5 people there, you get 1 vote and that's it?
Yeah, so the boards are considering a few options right now. Some of them it just being strictly population, but again, we have that 25 seat max.
Right.
And a lot of board members feel it's important that the transportation agencies also have a vote. So the math is very much in flux. So if you all have recommendations, I'd be happy to bring those back to the board. But it's a very kind of sensitive thing that all the boards are kind of grappling with because everybody wants as much representation as possible.
Yep. Okay. No, it just, because obviously Plant City is small.
I know Double Terrace are the
Yeah.
smallest.
Yeah, so you just want to make sure that, the representation still exists, you know what I mean? Versus, and I understand that there is going to be proportional in terms of population, just that the voice doesn't get erased altogether.
So I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you were from Plant City, but
Yes.
one thing that's being floated is what if there was a seat for the small cities council? So, most of Pinellas's municipalities wouldn't hit the threshold. So maybe there could be a separate council that has a voting seat at the board and that rotates. So that's definitely being taken into consideration. And again, it's so important to hear from all the municipalities and how you are most effectively representation. Yeah.
Okay. No, I did have one more question. I'm trying to remember where it was. Oh, and for the committees, when you say like, maybe like either to have one committee for the entire thing or a hybrid, what would that look like? Would it be like one county meets and then they send a representative out to like another committee or something like that?
Yeah, that could be. Again, we're like kind of building it all from scratch. So I think one way that was conceptualized is the committees at the county level still meet, and then maybe once a quarter, there's a regional meeting where they report on project priorities, or maybe you guys are updating, or maybe there would be a need for a 3-county regional ITS architecture or something like that, those things that rose to that level so that you could both balance the local and the regional needs.
So just, if we can just pause for just a moment in this conversation, because it's very important for us to have this conversation. I just want to let everyone know that Ed and I just talked about it. So DOT is going to come back next quarter at our next meeting in order to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk about it. The presentation that they're offering to us today is about the instrumentation associated with the ICM I-4 corridors, and then how that actually, the instrumentation, how our local governments are going to be able to use it, the data that comes from that, and then our association with the information that comes. So it gives them another quarter to get some stuff on the ground and built. So we're getting closer and closer, but we also need to all prepare for how we're going to manage that data as it comes into our systems and how we're going to be able to use it for safety and traffic operations. So thank you for putting forth that offer, given the time constraint, and now it allows us to have this conversation without a consideration of, oh, we got to hurry. So the only other action item we have today is for us to elect a vice chair. And that'll probably take about 2 minutes. So thank you very much. I appreciate your effort of being here. Greatly appreciate it and the investment. Thank you, Ron.
I have a question. Is this going to be presented to the other committees on this topic?
Yes, you're my first committee, but it'll be going through to September.
Okay, yeah, because that's one of the things, because some of us sit on the technical advisory committee and we're monthly, and there's a larger group, it's different, a bigger dynamic and so forth. So I think we'd have bigger input regarding that. because my initial thought is, kind of the direction you were talking about, again, very, very early. This is a big deal. I mean, to me, this is like, this topic is just kind of popped in there and you're used to seeing one that, this has, big impacts down the line. But, the idea that you got to have local, I think I'm thinking about the stuff we see, and in some cases, it's very Hillsborough centric. So there wouldn't be a reason to have a global 3-county look if we're only talking about golf carts and Temple Terrace, for example. But we also get topics like Suncoast Parkway or I-4 going across county lines. And a lot of times, as soon as it leaves Hillsborough, I'm like, okay, I'm assuming they know what they're talking about because I don't know a lot outside. So in those examples, we would certainly like to have it being presented to a group with at least all the counties there. So maybe that's the one that would be done on a less frequent basis with those regional topics focused there. But that's really early in the idea of the conversation about where it would go and how it would be made up. But yeah, my biggest thing is, Raleigh, this is a big deal. My only other question is, you talked about you couldn't guarantee whether it would be able to attract more money. I certainly see the rationale why it might. I guess my question is there any guarantee about being able to sustain current funding for the, right now, the three MPO/TPOs are made up of, funding that they generate to make sure they can, be in existence. Is that compromised by taking this on? And so that would be something I would be worried about or want to make sure that you guys were whole, going forward.
That's a great question. And those formula funds that are set aside for the MPOs to prioritize, that would not change. The pot will be the same as it is today. But right now what happens is, say we get 50 million of STBG, 55% of that goes to Hillsborough, then the other portion goes to the other areas. So we would have the pot would remain the same, but the decision-making body would just be one rather than three.
From my perspective, when it comes to transportation, I mean, many of our citizens, travelers are crossing jurisdictional boundaries anyway, and so being from a regional perspective, it makes a lot of sense for transportation. And then ITS specifically, we already do a lot of collaboration, just because of the overlay of DOT and the infrastructure, 275, 75 going through so much of the whole region. It makes a lot of sense. And then we also have those opportunities to share technology and ideas. I know that the Smart Cities Alliance already does that in many regards, but having some continued cohesiveness, I think, makes a lot of sense. So just for this committee. I understand there's other stuff around there, but just try to keep those blinders on, which I don't do well of.
Now I do have a comment.
Of course you do. It's
So
great.
is there anything on the finance proposal MOU about the data, how we're going to be sharing data between them?
That is a fabulous point. So no, the MOU, as I went over, it was very high level, but data sharing, data governance. We've got great DOT partners.
DOT, yeah.
But thinking about it from like a local data perspective, that's an excellent point. Make sure that stays on our radar.
And also interconnectivity between networks, that's something else we're going to have to discuss. Same thing. It's related. That's not necessarily the same thing, but related.
Well, no, what I'm saying is, a lot of it's going to talk
Oh, yeah.
about, you can't share the data without interconnectivity, right? So all of that ties together with some of the things.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Chair. The person who's speaking from the audience, we cannot hear them online.
Oh,
If they could step to the mic, that would be great.
could you step up, please?
No, all I was going to say is,
Identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Dale Cody with Metric Engineering. We're just working with Ed on some of the projects he was going to present on today. A lot of what the gentleman was referring to is tied together in the frame project and some of the things that he'll be presenting both on the data side, but naturally and necessarily also on the interconnection side as it relates to the networking piece. Matter of fact, a lot of MOUs were sent out as related to the frame project and things like that, that actually talked about the cooperative part that was led by Ed, Megan, and Ron from District 7. Last thing, just if I could, one thing to consider from a committee point of view, as MPOs and TPOs are forced more into an operational models, particularly on the ITS side, you may find that you'll be in positions down the road to navigate larger projects across multiple jurisdictional boundaries and be utilized as a neutral party rather than a single entity leading one effort that maybe affects 3, 4, 5 counties. That happens quite a bit now. And the MPOs have found themselves in that role. And I mean that in a positive way. So something to consider, very consistent with what your comments were, is when you're thinking in terms of that from an ITS point of view, there are models, so Metro Plan be a good example, where they've kind of stretched beyond that, managed funds for retiming, capital improvements and things like that were looked at regionally. I'm sure you guys know Eric, so I'm sure you can get a little insight there. But any questions? Sorry, any questions?
And then, well, however, in association with your comment about data, and last week I was at Metro Lab Network, their summit, annual summit. So Metro Lab Network is groups of universities as well as municipalities, and how to have information shared and using research and getting it into the applied environment. Much of it is supported by National Science Foundation, and they just recently published new guidance on data governance. So they have a really good, well, I need to work with our T&I group because I don't know, and I'll check with our legal department as well. But they do have guidance, so from the local government side, how to manage your data and monitor it and secure it as much as possible. So as much as we may have the state level, providing guidance, we at the local level, we need to make sure we have everything strongly contained and managed and governed. So they should have some very modern, most current, up-to-date information on how to manage data. So just thought I'd share that. So you can just reach out to me and I can see what we can pull together and help and share. I know that Miami-Dade is also a member of Metro Lab. And universities are too. I just don't have a full list. Okay, additional comments about the hire committee?
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Just, is there a specific MPO that's going to be taking the lead on coordinating or being?
That's a great point. It really has been a coordinated effort between Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas. I'm sure y'all know Beth is retiring in November, so we've been trying to lead a lot of stuff now before we kind of have that transition. But I would say it's an equal partnership among the 3 MPOs.
I just have a question on, like, to clarify the MOU, because I'm kind of trapped into it now and getting it handled. I mean, obviously, it's not an MOU to create a regional MPO. Are we kind of, I'm reading the part A of number 2 is to investigate the formation of such a body. Is that what the overall intent is?
I think
like research and investigating?
So I would say it's research plus moving us towards that July 1, 2027. Just in 2019, there was a big effort led by TBARDA to really study the pros and cons. So that really wasn't that long ago. So that's still fresh. But it also, the MOU doesn't commit to a merger. So I think it was artfully crafted to try to walk that line to not commit to anything, but also lay out steps to do it by 2027.
Right, that's what I'm kind of gathering from it, because it's a little, it talks about, well, we're going to investigate the potential for doing that, and then there's other ones that are like commitments. So, well, all the staff will be offered positions. So that's kind of, it seems hard to be able to make that commitment while you're still investigating whether it can be done. So that's not that I'm opposed to it. I would like everybody to be figured, but I'm just saying that was the one that happened to jump out at me. But when we're voting today to move it forward, I think we just need to make sure we're what we're voting on. Is it? I mean, are we endorsing it by doing this, or are we saying we're endorsing the idea of you really? We understand that it's kind of come to this. This is how I take it. Initial studies have been done, and the direction we're going is we think it's plausible and probably a good idea. And this is going to further take that notion and potentially get there, but we're not committed to it yet. Is that kind of?
I would think that that's a fair description of where it's going, and just seeking your recommendation to the TPO board of if they should sign the MOU.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so with that, do we have a motion? Could you put that back up with the request? I like to be sure we have the wording correct. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Polly will make a motion to recommend the Hillsborough TPO board sign the creating Tampa Bay Metropolitan Planning Organization Memorandum of Understanding. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Brian McCarthy.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None being heard, the motion passes. Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Okay, the last item we have, action item, is for us to hold an election of just the office of the vice chair, with Brian Gentry leaving the county that left the position of being vice chair empty. So, do we have any nominations? Let me open the floor for nominations for vice chair for the ITS committee. Okay, anyone to volunteer first?
I volunteer.
Pardon?
I volunteer for the
You volunteer.
position.
Brian Zayas volunteers for the position as vice chair. Have another volunteer? No? Okay, so with that, you're it. This sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I wasn't gonna go straight for the motion, okay. But we have to make a motion that he's nominated, or can we just make a motion for him the position? Okay.
You don't even have to do that. You've done everything you need to do. He's
Oh.
volunteered. No other nominations or volunteers were made by default. There you go. As long as nobody opposes.
Okay, anyone opposed to Brian Zayas as being the vice chair of the ITS? None being heard, the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for stepping up. Yeah, you can be saddled with coming up with the agenda every month. Okay, so going back to the agenda, thank you very much again to DOT for being rescheduled. Old and new business. Do we need to go over anything under item 7?
I just wanted to put it here because we had this step up from last meeting.
Okay.
2050 plan needs assessment presentation and everything is in the agenda. So just wanted to let the committee know that. Take a look at it. The only reason why I put it here was the final plan will be presented to the committees and board in August and September, and this committee won't meet for that.
Okay.
So just wanted to bring it up to you all to the floor to see if you had a chance to take a look at it.
Okay.
This presentation was supposed to go as a status update last meeting.
So there's nothing else. Just check your agenda.
Yes.
Okay. And then anything about the addendums?
Sorry, I realized I was late. I probably missed it. I mean, there is another status report on the agenda. Was that one tabled?
Yes, that's the DOT one that I was referring to. Yeah, we were gonna.
I didn't know if that was the same.
Yep, that is. Okay. Is there anything else on the 9, A, B, C, or D? Anything specific in there?
No, these are just there.
As reference? Okay, wonderful. Okay. Any other open items? Anything good for the, good for the?
And nominations for presentations to suggestions.
I'm sorry, Vishaka, we can't hear you. Can you please speak into the mic?
Margaret to.
Oh, you were telling me? Oh. Does anyone have any ideas for any presentations? because Vishaka will be asking you again in 2 months.
Do you guys know anything about the Bright Line going to Tampa? Where they're going through, is there any talk about incorporating that into any future, like, plans?
I don't know, was there anything else? I mean, I just noticed that on the, in the addendum, they have the Polk County Sunrail virtual
Right.
public workshops. I don't have any.
I don't know, I don't know, it's that's something, but I
That's
can check back, report back.
Yeah, that could be a good one. All right. Anything else?
Did this committee get presented on the extension of the zone?
No, I haven't.
Because I don't think, I know it's all intact, but, and that's not really a true IPS, but it's getting a lot of media attention right now.
Okay.
So I don't know if that was something that the group might want to hear.
Do they have a new slip ramp and stuff? I mean, we can check with the,
Yes.
I mean,
anyone else? Okay. Well, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
you're gonna put that construction work machine.
Really? Was it that loud?